Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone tried to strip away your dignity in front of the whole world? Imagine working silently in the shadows, cleaning floors no one notices, only to have a powerful millionaire wrap his hand around your throat in the very place you earned your living. What would you choose in that moment's silence? Surrender, or the courage to stand tall against arrogance and abuse? This is the story of Naomi Turner, a woman the world thought was just a janitor. But hidden beneath her quiet uniform was a past forged in discipline, strength, and sacrifice, a military past that Whitaker, the man who tried to break her, never saw coming. If it were you, would you find the strength to fight back? Would you risk everything to reclaim not just your seat at the table, but your very right to be treated with respect? Stay with us, because this story isn't just about power and downfall. It's about the choices that define who we really are. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because you won't want to miss what happens next. The night had settled heavy over downtown, pressing its silence into the corners of Whitaker Plaza. The glass tower shimmered faintly under the glow of street lamps, its polished facade reflecting a city that never truly slept. Yet beneath the tower, in the underground parking lot, it was a different world. Shadows swallowed whole stretches of concrete, and the hum of fluorescent lights seemed just one heartbeat away from flickering out. Naomi Turner walked steadily through the dim aisles, the rubber soles of her work shoes tapping against the cold floor. In her right hand, she carried a faded tote bag, stuffed with cleaning rags and a thermos that still smelled faintly of black coffee. On her shoulder hung the quiet fatigue of another long day blending in as one of the invisible. She was supposed to be invisible. That was the point. Her cover as a janitor wasn't a disguise for vanity or theatrics. It was deliberate, part of how she ran her company, observing her empire not from the corner office, but from the blind spots where real truth leaked out. Tonight, though, that choice had consequences she hadn't fully measured. A sudden echo behind her sliced through the silence. Footsteps. Heavy, careless, arrogant. Turner. The voice cracked against the walls like a whip. She paused, turned slightly, and there he was, Whitaker. His tailored suit caught the pale light, the glint of a gold watch flashing as he stepped forward. His tie was loose, his expression drunk not on alcohol, but on his own power. Naomi set her tote down, calm as a still lake. "Mr. Whitaker," she said evenly, her voice stripped of emotion. Bradley's lips curled into something sharp, something cruel. He closed the distance, his footsteps echoing. "Do you know what bothers me most about people like you?" His voice dripped venom. "You don't know your place. You think you belong in the same building as me? Breathing the same air?" Naomi stood her ground. She didn't flinch, didn't give him the satisfaction of fear. Her silence only stoked his anger. In a single motion, Bradley's hand shot out, grabbing her by the collar, shoving her back against a pillar. The sound of fabric tightening echoed like a gunshot in the still air. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. "You think because you mop floors here, you matter," Bradley hissed, his face inches from hers. "You're nothing, less than nothing, and tonight I'll remind you of that." For a fraction of a second, Naomi closed her eyes. She inhaled deeply, steady. Her pulse didn't spike. Instead, a strange calm washed over her, the same calm she had known in deserts half a world away when gunfire cracked overhead. Her mind flickered to those night's dust storms, broken radios, the faint smell of diesel, the faces of soldiers she had led, the weight of responsibility. She had seen men like Bradley before. They wore different clothes, sometimes uniforms, sometimes robes, but the arrogance was the same. the belief that power gave them license to strip dignity from others. She opened her eyes, locking them onto his. "You don't want to do this," she said quietly. But Bradley laughed, the sound sharp, echoing against concrete. "I do whatever I want. You're not in a position to tell me otherwise." His grip tightened. For a moment, it seemed like the world itself was holding its breath. From the corner of the lot, a sound broke through. The metallic creak of a door, the faint shuffle of another pair of feet. Ethan Cole, the young night guard, stepped into view, his flashlight beam cutting across the concrete. He froze at the sight before him. Whitaker, the heir, clutching the janitor by the throat. "Mr. Whitaker." Ethan's voice wavered. Bradley didn't look back. "Stay out of this." "Cole, it doesn't concern you." Ethan's flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. His instinct screamed to intervene, but the weight of hierarchy pressed down on him. Bradley Whitaker wasn't just another man, he was power incarnate in this building. Ethan's paycheck, his future, felt chained to the man's whims. Naomi's eyes flicked toward Ethan for a second, calm, almost reassuring. She gave the faintest shake of her head. "Don't. Not now." The grip on her throat wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. Bradley believed he owned her silence, her space, her very breath. But he didn't know who she truly was. He didn't know that beneath the janitor's uniform beat the steady, disciplined heart of a woman forged in fire, trained to endure. Naomi allowed herself a long, slow breath. Then she spoke, voice low but clear. "This ends differently than you think." Bradley sneered. "No, sweetheart. It ends when I say it ends. But the universe has a way of betraying men drunk on their own certainty. Above them, a security camera. One Bradley thought disabled blinked faintly back to life. Somewhere in the shadows. Ethan shifted his stance, torn between fear and duty. And Naomi Turner, despite the bruising grip at her throat, stood with the quiet strength of someone who had already survived worse. The parking lot held its silence, but the night was far from over. When Naomi finally got home that night, she didn't switch on the overhead light. Instead, she let the soft glow of a single lamp spill across her modest living room. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner was the only sound breaking the quiet. She set her tote bag down by the door, unbuttoned her worn jacket, and slipped off her shoes with a long sigh. The room was small, but it was hers. A faded couch, a stack of well-read books by the armrest, and on the wall an array of framed photographs and military medals that most people at Whitaker Plaza would never imagine belonged to the quiet woman who mopped their floors. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, a certificate for 20 years of service. Naomi walked toward the wall and let her fingers hover over one frame in particular. A photograph of her younger self, in desert camouflage, squinting against the sun, arms slung around a fellow soldier. They were both grinning, despite the dust, despite the heat, despite the war. The friend in that photo never came home. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her, older now, with lines carved by both grief and resilience. She pressed her lips together. Bradley Whitaker's hand on her throat was still a phantom memory against her skin. But what lingered even more was the rage, his certainty that she was beneath him, that she was invisible. She lowered herself onto the couch and leaned back, allowing her mind to drift. Years earlier, before the janitor uniform, before the secret identity. Naomi had commanded troops in Afghanistan. She was known for her calm under fire, her uncanny ability to read a situation before chaos swallowed it whole. Soldiers trusted her because she never wasted words and never wasted lives. But military life had cost her, too. Her husband, Marcus Turner, another officer, had been killed in an ambush in Kandahar. She'd been the one to identify his body. She carried that memory like a locked box, one she opened only on nights like this, when the city was asleep and the weight of her double life pressed down. After Marcus's death, Naomi returned stateside with their young daughter, Alana. She was tired of war, tired of violence, tired of orders that never seemed to value human dignity. She shifted into business, channeling her discipline into building something new. Slowly, almost quietly, she acquired companies, invested wisely, and became CEO of a holding group that controlled significant shares in commercial real estate, including Whitaker Plaza itself. Most people in the building had no idea. They saw a janitor with tired shoes and a quiet face. They didn't know the contracts bore her name, that the mortgage on the tower was signed off by her hand, that their fates were bound to the decisions she made behind closed doors. Why keep it secret? Because Naomi had learned something long ago. People reveal their truest selves when they believe no one important is watching. She didn't need their courtesy when they thought she was powerful. She wanted to see how they treated her when they assumed she was nothing. That was why she had chosen the cover of invisibility, not out of shame, but out of strategy. Still, nights like this tested her resolve. She reached for the thermos she'd brought home, poured what was left of the lukewarm coffee into a chipped mug, and sipped. The bitter taste grounded her. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her daughter, Alana, who was away at college in North Carolina. "Love you, Mom. Don't stay up too late." Naomi smiled faintly. She typed back, "Love you more. Get some rest." Then set the phone aside, the warmth of those words softening the edges of her day. But her mind returned to Bradley Whitaker, the arrogance in his voice, the weight of his grip. She replayed it not as a victim, but as a strategist. She knew men like him rarely stopped at intimidation. When they felt their control slipping, they escalated. That was what worried her, and she wasn't wrong. Earlier that same day, before the confrontation in the parking lot, Naomi had overheard Bradley in the hallway. He was speaking to someone on the phone, tone sharp, hushed, but careless enough that fragments carried through. Words like "fix this," "she needs to learn," and "no one will ask questions." She had stored those fragments away, the way she always did, like intelligence gathered on a battlefield. The soldier in her never retired. Her thoughts drifted further back, to her decision to first step into Whitaker Plaza undercover. It hadn't been about Bradley at all. At least, not at first. It had been about culture, how people treated janitors, receptionists, security guards, the ones often unseen. She believed leadership wasn't about corner offices, but about understanding the quiet spaces no one paid attention to. But Bradley had forced himself into the center of that mission. His arrogance made him impossible to ignore. Naomi closed her eyes, leaning back on the couch. Memories of Marcus flooded her mind, his voice, his laughter, the way he used to say, "The real test of power is how you treat those who can do nothing for you." She whispered those words aloud, letting them anchor her. On the coffee table sat a leather notebook, worn at the edges. She flipped it open. Inside were pages of observations she had made while working undercover, notes about employees, culture, incidents of bias. She wrote quickly now, capturing the parking lot encounter in sharp detail. Dates, times, exact words Bradley had spoken. She even noted Ethan Cole's presence, his hesitation, his flashlight beam trembling. Documentation was a weapon, too. By the time she set the pen down, fatigue pressed heavy against her eyelids. She rose, walked to her bedroom, and paused by a small wooden box on her dresser. Inside lay her husband's dog tags, resting on top of a folded American flag. She touched the tags gently, whispered a quiet promise to Marcus. "I'll handle this," she said. "On my terms." And with that, Naomi Turner prepared herself. The janitor uniform was only part of her truth. The medals on her wall, the leadership in her veins that was the rest. Bradley Whitaker thought he had seen her weakness. He hadn't yet begun to see her strength. While Naomi Turner sat in her modest apartment that night, gathering her thoughts and writing in her notebook. Across town, Bradley Whitaker occupied a very different space. The Whitaker estate was a sprawling property that seemed to stretch for acres, perched on the northern edge of the city like a fortress built on wealth. The driveway curved past iron gates and manicured hedges trimmed so precisely they looked like they had been measured with rulers. A fleet of luxury cars gleamed beneath a stone archway. Inside, the mansion was a museum of privilege, high ceilings framed by ornate crown molding, oil paintings of ancestors who had built their fortune in railroads and steel, and hallways that smelled faintly of imported cigars. Bradley walked across polished hardwood floors in his socks, tie discarded on a leather chair, a half-empty glass of scotch in his hand. He had grown up in this world, wrapped in silk and entitlement. His father, Charles Whitaker Sr., had drilled into him from an early age that the Whitaker name was not just a family, it was an institution. "We don't lose," his father would say, leaning over the boy with eyes sharp as cut glass. "We own. We decide. Everyone else falls in line." Bradley absorbed that message like scripture. At school, he had never faced consequences for his arrogance. Teachers bent rules. Coaches made excuses. If he bullied another kid, it was overlooked because of his last name. By college, the habits had calcified into a personality charming when he wanted to be, cruel when he felt challenged. His mother had passed when he was 15, and though she had tried to instill empathy in him, her influence was a whisper drowned out by his father's thunder. That night, after the parking lot incident, Bradley felt no regret. He felt invigorated. He paced the marble-floored living room, scotch sloshing in his glass, replaying the look on Naomi's face when he had gripped her collar. To him, it was victory, a reaffirmation that he could dominate anyone, even the lowliest janitor. He never once considered that she had stood unnervingly calm in his grasp. That calm should have unsettled him, but arrogance blinded him. In the corner of the room, a portrait of his grandfather glared down, oil-painted eyes full of stern pride. Bradley raised his glass toward it. "Don't worry, grandfather," he muttered. "I'm keeping the name strong. No one disrespects us." But even as he said it, an edge of unease crept in. Because Bradley wasn't only fighting janitors, he was fighting shadows of his own making. Earlier that day, he had received an email from the board of Whitaker Real Estate Holdings. They were pressing him about missed targets, about culture concerns raised by employees. Bradley had dismissed it as noise, but deep down he knew his reckless behavior was starting to cost the family legacy. Investors didn't like headlines about discrimination lawsuits. They didn't like rumors of intimidation in the workplace. Still, Bradley dismissed the board as weak. "They've forgotten what it means to lead," he told himself. "They'd rather bow to political correctness than keep power where it belongs." He poured another drink. Bradley's phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Tony Marquez, the man he had hired more than once to take care of problems. All set for tomorrow night. She won't give you trouble again." Bradley smirked, typing back with the arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. "Good. Make it clean. Make sure she learns." He didn't use Naomi's name. He didn't need to. To him, she wasn't a person. She was an obstacle, and obstacles were meant to be crushed. He wandered into his study, lined with books he never read, and slumped into a leather chair. The city lights glittered through the tall windows, but he barely noticed them. His thoughts drifted back to his childhood. He remembered one evening when he was 12, standing on the balcony beside his father, overlooking the estate. "See that?" Bradley, his father, had said, gesturing to the workers trimming the hedges below. "They work for us. Their job is to keep this place perfect so that we don't have to. That's the natural order of things." Bradley had nodded, internalizing the hierarchy of the world as if it were carved in stone. Some were born to command. Others were born to serve. It was a lesson he had never questioned, until Naomi Turner. There was something about the way she had looked at him in that parking lot. Not fear, not desperation, but something else, a steadiness. It was subtle, but it lodged in his memory like a splinter. He told himself it didn't matter. She would break. They all broke eventually. And yet he poured another drink, restless. He could still hear her words. "You don't want to do this?" For the first time in years, he felt the faintest sting of doubt. Still, he shoved it down, the way he had always shoved down weakness. He drowned it in scotch, in the echo of his father's voice telling him he was untouchable. By midnight, Bradley stumbled upstairs, leaving his glass on the counter, and collapsed onto his bed without bothering to undress. He would sleep, he told himself, and tomorrow he would finish what he started. But sleep didn't come easily. In the quiet of his mansion, he dreamed of faces he couldn't quite place. Faces that stared back at him, calm, unflinching, as if waiting for him to fall. When morning came, Bradley awoke with a sour taste of alcohol and arrogance still coating his mouth. He brushed it off, straightened his tie, and prepared to face another day, convinced of his own invincibility. What he didn't know was that the world he thought he owned was already shifting beneath him. Naomi Turner was no ordinary janitor, and the calm in her eyes the night before was not submission. It was warning. Whitaker Plaza looked immaculate from the outside. Glass walls stretched skyward, catching the morning sun like polished mirrors. Suits passed through the revolving doors with coffee in hand, their heels tapping against marble floors. Visitors often remarked on how pristine the lobby always looked, gleaming tiles, shining brass rails, the faint smell of lemon polish. What they didn't notice were the people who kept it that way. Naomi Turner slipped into her uniform again that morning, bucket in tow, blending into the rhythm of those silent corridors. No one glanced twice at her. To most, she was invisible, like the hum of the elevators or the click of keyboards in distant offices. But Naomi noticed everything. She noticed Ethan Cole, the young night guard, lingering longer than usual by the security desk, eyes flicking toward her as if apologizing for the night before. He didn't speak, not yet, but his silence carried weight. She noticed Monica Liang, the HR director, brisk and sharp in her charcoal blazer, speaking to an assistant about compliance training with a tone that suggested battles she was already fighting behind closed doors. She noticed Sam Ortega, the quiet IT engineer, huddled in a corner cubicle, fixing an endless stream of glitches no one thanked him for. His screens glowed with lines of code, but his eyes often wandered watching dynamics, absorbing patterns. And she noticed Grace Holloway, the accountant with silver-streaked hair who always arrived early. Her desk decorated with small reminders of family, a folded paper crane, a photograph of 2 children in faded uniforms, smiles frozen in time. Each of them occupied the margins of Whitaker Plaza. Each of them knew what it felt like to be overlooked. Naomi had been documenting these observations for months. In her notebook, she wrote not only about the arrogance of Bradley Whitaker, but also about the resilience of people like Grace and Sam. To her, they weren't just footnotes. They were the heartbeat of the building. That morning, while executives held meetings about profits, Naomi quietly mopped a hallway outside a glass-walled conference room. Inside, Bradley stood at the head of the table, voice booming as he scolded mid-level managers about efficiency and brand image. He didn't see Naomi standing just feet away, but she saw him, and she saw the way the managers nodded with tight jaws, careful not to push back. She wrote in her mind, fear disguised as agreement. When the meeting ended, Bradley swept past her without so much as a glance. His cologne lingered in the air, sharp and artificial. Naomi dipped her mop again, steady, unbothered. She had learned long ago that silence was its own form of power. Later that day, in the break room, Naomi overheard Grace speaking quietly to another accountant. "They're cutting hours again," Grace murmured, stirring powdered creamer into her coffee. "First it's hours, then it's jobs. I've seen this before." Her colleague shrugged, resigned. "What can we do? We're not the Whitakers." Naomi caught Grace's eye as she passed. Grace offered a polite smile, weary but kind. Naomi nodded, a silent acknowledgement that said, "I see you. I hear you." It was a small exchange, but it mattered. By afternoon, Naomi was polishing brass fixtures near the lobby when Ethan Cole approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Hey," he said, voice low. "About last night?" He shifted his weight, eyes flicking to the cameras mounted above. "I should have stepped in. I froze." Naomi paused, cloth in hand, studying him. He was young, maybe 24, with earnest eyes and a nervous energy that reminded her of soldiers fresh out of boot camp. "You did what you thought you could," Naomi said softly. "That matters." Ethan frowned. "Doesn't feel like it mattered." "It will," she replied. "The choice you make next time will matter more." Ethan looked at her then, really looked, as if sensing a depth he hadn't noticed before. He nodded slowly, almost a promise. As the day wound down, Naomi took her usual post in the underground parking lot, methodically sweeping corners most executives never set foot in. Down there, the air was damp, echoing with the distant hum of ventilation. That was when Sam Ortega appeared, carrying a laptop bag slung across his shoulder. He hesitated when he saw her, then offered a quiet greeting. "Evening," he said. Naomi nodded. "Long day," Sam gave a humorless laugh. "Long year." He paused, shifting his bag. "I don't usually talk much. But you ever notice how things happen here, and nobody says anything?" Naomi tilted her head. "All the time." Sam looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to read whether she understood more than she let on. "Figures." He gave a small wave and kept walking. Naomi watched him disappear into the dim light, her instincts telling her that silence wasn't indifference, it was observation. People like Sam saw everything. They just waited for the right moment to act. That night, Naomi returned home exhausted but filled with a strange clarity. Whitaker Plaza wasn't just glass and steel. It was a stage where invisible people carried invisible burdens. And slowly, those burdens were knitting together into something larger. Bradley Whitaker thought he owned the building. But Naomi knew better. Power didn't just live in boardrooms. It lived in the quiet solidarity of people who had been overlooked too long. She sat on her couch, opened her notebook, and wrote one line at the top of a fresh page. Allies are closer than they appear. She underlined it twice, because Naomi Turner wasn't just surviving at Whitaker Plaza. She was preparing. The city never truly slept. Neon lights flickered along alleys. Cars honked impatiently on midnight streets, and bars spilled their last patrons into the night. In the darker corners, however, other rhythms pulsed, rhythms Naomi Turner understood too well. On the east side, inside a warehouse that looked abandoned from the street, Tony Marquez leaned against a metal table littered with empty beer bottles. His crew surrounded him, 4 men with tattoos crawling up their arms, one woman with sharp eyes and a blade tucked in her boot. They weren't soldiers. They were opportunists. But under Tony's lead, they moved like a pack. Tony tapped ash from his cigarette into an old soda can. Bradley says the janitor gave him trouble. He muttered, voice rough. Wants us to make sure she doesn't again. The woman with the knife smirked. A janitor. That's what he's worried about. Tony's eyes narrowed. Doesn't matter what she is. What matters is who's paying. The men nodded. Bradley Whitaker's money carried weight. It always had. And for Tony, jobs like this weren't about logic. They were about loyalty to cash. Still, as he spoke, he couldn't shake the image of Bradley's smug face at their last meeting. The millionaire had looked at Tony the same way he probably looked at everyone else, like a tool. Disposable. Tony didn't like being looked at that way, but money was money, and pride didn't keep the lights on. Back at Whitaker Plaza, Naomi finished her shift late that night. The underground garage was quiet, except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the faint drip of a leaking pipe. She parked her mop and broom, checked the corners like she always did, and felt it an unease prickling along the back of her neck. Years in combat had honed her instincts. She didn't ignore them now. She walked slower than usual, letting her eyes sweep the shadows. The garage was empty. At least, it looked empty. But silence has tones, and this one wasn't right. Naomi adjusted the strap of her bag and kept moving. Footsteps steady, heartbeat measured. She didn't let fear control her breathing. Fear was a luxury she'd been trained to live without. When she reached her car, she paused. A faint scuff echoed from somewhere behind the concrete pillars. Too faint for most people to notice, not too faint for her. She didn't react. She simply slid into her seat, started the engine, and drove out, headlights cutting through the gloom. The next morning, Naomi documented it in her notebook. She didn't write paranoid. She wrote surveillance. She had learned long ago that intuition was just unprocessed data, waiting to be proven right. Meanwhile, Tony's crew had indeed been there. They'd watched from the shadows, testing her patterns. One of the men grumbled afterward. She's sharper than she looks. Tony only shrugged. Doesn't matter. Everyone breaks, but Naomi Turner wasn't everyone. At the plaza, her days unfolded in quiet rhythm, but beneath the surface, she was calculating. She checked reflections in windows, memorized license plates that appeared too often, tracked subtle changes in the building's pulse. She wrote notes about Ethan's nervous glances, about Grace's sighs, about Sam's cautious questions. She saw allies forming without words, and she noticed Bradley watching her more often. Not directly, he wouldn't lower himself to that, but through side glances in hallways, through the way his conversations fell silent when she passed. He was plotting, She could feel it. That afternoon, in the employee break room, Monica Liang called a sudden meeting. "We've had reports of harassment," she told the gathered staff. Her voice clipped. "If anyone experiences misconduct, my office is open." Naomi listened from the back, mop handle resting against her shoulder. Monica's words were well-meaning, but Naomi saw the way employees avoided eye contact, afraid of being singled out. Words weren't enough here. What people needed was action. Later, Grace approached Naomi quietly in the hallway. "Funny thing," Grace whispered. "HR talks about open doors, but we all know who owns the keys." Naomi gave her a small nod. Grace's eyes lingered, searching for something solidarity. Maybe. Naomi didn't promise, but she didn't deny either. That night, as Naomi walked home, her phone buzzed. A message from her daughter. "Alana, big exam tomorrow. Wish me luck." Naomi smiled, texting back, "You don't need luck. You've got preparation. That's better." She slipped her phone away and looked over her shoulder. Across the street, a dark SUV idled too long at a red light. When the signal turned green, it didn't move right away. Naomi adjusted her stride, unhurried, but her mind cataloged every detail: the make of the car, the dent near the rear bumper, the faint crack on the windshield. Tony's crew again. She was sure of it. Inside the SUV, Tony stubbed out a cigarette and muttered, "She's too calm. Doesn't even flinch." One of his men asked, "So what's the plan?" Tony stared after Naomi's retreating figure. "The plan," he said slowly, "is patience. She'll slip. They always slip." But Naomi Turner wasn't planning to slip. She was planning to stand. That night, back in her apartment, Naomi opened her wooden box again. She touched Marcus's dog tags, whispering softly, "It's starting." Then she reached beneath the folded flag and pulled out something she hadn't touched in years. A small, leather-bound field manual. Not just military tactics, but her own notes scrawled in margins. She flipped to a page titled Counter-Surveillance. She read the words, not because she'd forgotten, but because repetition calmed her. Stay aware of exits, mirror routes, document vehicles, identify patterns, trust your instincts. She closed the book, exhaled, and felt steadier. She wasn't a janitor. She wasn't prey. She was a soldier who had chosen to wait until the battlefield revealed itself. Bradley Whitaker believed money bought obedience. Tony Marquez believed fear broke anyone. Naomi Turner believed in neither. She believed in patience. And she believed that when the storm came, she would be ready to answer it. By the time the week turned, Whitaker Plaza seemed unchanged to most who passed through its mirrored doors. Executives still clicked across the marble lobby in designer shoes. Assistants still clutched folders like lifelines. The hum of printers and the ping of elevator doors filled the air with the same rhythm as always. But beneath that polished surface, subtle shifts had begun. Naomi Turner could feel it, the way a soldier senses the weather changing before the first drop of rain. It started with Ethan Cole. The young guard lingered near Naomi more often now, not in a way that drew suspicion, but enough that she noticed his pattern. On Tuesday afternoon, as she polished the brass rail in the lobby, he stepped closer and spoke without looking directly at her. "I checked last night's footage," he said in a low voice. "The garage cameras. They glitched. 4 minutes missing." Naomi didn't pause her work. "Accident." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Not a chance. Someone looped the feed." Her cloth moved in slow circles against the brass. "Keep the file safe. Don't mention it again. Not yet." Ethan nodded once, then walked away. Posture casual. To anyone watching, It looked like a guard doing rounds. But Naomi knew this was more than that. It was the first step of loyalty. Later that week, Grace Holloway approached Naomi in the break room. She carried her coffee cup carefully, as though holding something fragile. Her voice was soft, but the weariness in it carried like weight. "They're shifting accounts again," Grace murmured, eyes on the floor. "I've seen this game before. First, they shuffle numbers to confuse us. Then they cut staff." Naomi studied her. Grace's hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down. She was a woman who had lived through too many layoffs, too many broken promises. "What do you need?" Naomi asked quietly. Grace blinked, surprised by the question. "Need, yes. If they push you, what helps you push back?" Grace hesitated, then gave a sad smile. "Proof. They can deny feelings. They can't deny paper." Naomi gave a small nod. Grace didn't know it yet, but proof was exactly what Naomi specialized in gathering. Sam Ortega entered the break room just then, laptop under one arm. He poured himself coffee without a word, but his eyes flicked toward Naomi and Grace, lingering a fraction too long. Naomi caught it. Sam was listening, always listening. That evening, as Naomi emptied trash bins on the 12th floor, Sam appeared in the hallway. His voice was low, measured. "You ever wonder," he asked, "why the network keeps crashing at night?" Naomi looked at him, silent. "It doesn't crash," Sam continued. "It's pulled offline. Someone's wiping logs." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "What kind of logs? Messages, calls, files?" He glanced around before lowering his voice further. "From the Whitakers' accounts." Naomi didn't answer right away. She simply tied off the trash bag and lifted it, her face calm. But inside, her mind was racing. Bradley wasn't just arrogant, he was covering tracks. Sam shifted his bag on his shoulder. "I don't know what you're up to, but if you're paying attention, you'll want to know this." Naomi met his eyes steadily. "I am paying attention." Sam gave a short nod, then walked off. By Thursday. Naomi felt the threads tightening. She hadn't asked for an alliance, but one was forming. Ethan with his cameras, Grace with her ledgers, Sam with his digital evidence, Monica Liang too. Though Naomi had yet to test her fully, seemed like a leader caught between compliance and conscience. That afternoon, Naomi got her chance. She was cleaning near Monica's office when two executives stormed out. Voices raised. "She's pushing back again." One muttered, "HR's supposed to protect us, not challenge us." Naomi glanced in, seeing Monica at her desk, shoulders squared, eyes tired but defiant. Hours later, Monica herself approached Naomi in the corridor. She looked around first, ensuring no one else lingered. "You were in the garage last week," Monica said quietly. "You saw something, didn't you?" Naomi's cloth stilled mid-swipe. "What makes you think that?" "Because you don't carry yourself like a janitor," Monica replied. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. And because people like Bradley don't lose their temper over nothing. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Naomi debated whether to deny, but something in Monica's gaze told her this woman could be trusted at least enough. "I saw enough," Naomi said simply. Monica's lips tightened. "Then watch yourself. He's not just cruel. He's careless, and careless men are dangerous." Naomi nodded, filing away the warning. Another thread had been tied. That night, Naomi walked home along her usual route. But instead of heading straight to her apartment, she stopped at a small diner she sometimes used as a thinking place. The kind of diner with chipped coffee mugs and waitresses who called everyone hon. She slid into a booth, ordered black coffee, and pulled out her notebook. Flipping through the pages, she began mapping connections. Ethan Cameras, Grace Finances, Sam Networks, Monica Policy. Each had a piece of the puzzle. Alone, they were vulnerable. Together, they were leverage. Her hand hesitated as she wrote. She thought of Marcus again, of his steady voice. The strongest armies aren't built by rank, they're built by trust. Naomi pressed her pen harder against the page. Trust. That was what she was building now, brick by brick, with people who didn't yet realize they were forming a unit. Across town, Tony Marquez's SUV rolled past Whitaker Plaza once more. His crew watched the building like wolves circling prey. One of them asked, "When do we move?" Tony exhaled smoke, eyes on the mirrored glass. "Soon. She's getting comfortable. That's when we strike." But Naomi wasn't comfortable. She was preparing. Every word from Grace, every glance from Ethan, every breadcrumb from Sam, she gathered them like ammunition. And though Bradley Whitaker strutted through his empire, believing no one could touch him, Naomi knew better. The cracks were already forming. At dawn, the next day, Naomi stood by her window, city light spilling over her medals and photographs. She touched Marcus's dog tags again, whispering to the empty room, "They think I'm alone. They're wrong." Friday night fell heavy over the city. The wind cut sharper than usual, scattering old flyers across cracked sidewalks. For most employees at Whitaker Plaza, it was the end of a long week. They hurried to trains, buses, and waiting cars, their minds already halfway home. Naomi Turner lingered behind, as she often did. She finished her last sweep of the 12th floor, checked the supply closet twice, and then carried her bucket to the freight elevator. Routine was her camouflage. Routine made her invisible. But tonight, something felt different. The building hummed too quietly, as if holding its breath. Naomi's instincts prickled an echo of war zones where silence always meant danger was near. She tightened her grip on the mop handle, reminding herself that a simple tool could be a weapon if needed. Down in the garage, Ethan Cole waited by the security desk, pretending to review camera feeds. His eyes flicked toward Naomi as she stepped out of the elevator. "You should head home quick tonight," he said under his breath. "Something's off." Naomi studied him. "What did you see?" "Two vehicles circling the lot. Same ones from earlier this week. One's a black SUV, dent near the bumper. The other's a gray pickup, tinted windows. They didn't park, just circled." Naomi nodded once, no fear on her face. "Keep the footage safe. Don't delete. Don't edit. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied automatically, surprising himself with the formality. Naomi gave him a faint smile and continued toward her car. The garage echoed with each step. Her eyes swept corners, shadows, pipes. She had walked battlefields quieter than this, but tonight the silence sharpened like glass underfoot. Halfway to her car, she heard it a shuffle. Then the metallic click of a boot scraping against concrete. "Evening, janitor," a voice drawled from the shadows. Naomi turned slowly. 4 figures emerged, shapes breaking free from the dim light. Tony Marquez led them, cigarette glowing between his fingers, eyes narrowed with a predator's patience. "You've been hard to catch alone," Tony said, "but we figured you'd have to come down here eventually." Naomi's face was calm, her voice even. "If you want to scare me, you'll have to try harder." One of the men laughed. "She's got a mouth." Tony flicked his cigarette aside. "Let's keep this clean. Folks, no need to break bones unless she fights." Naomi tilted her head slightly. That's the mistake. Assuming I won't. For a second, silence hung, stretched taut. Then the first man lunged. Naomi sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it sharply, sending him crashing against the hood of a parked car. The clang echoed through the garage. Another rushed in from behind. Naomi swung her mop handle like a staff, striking his knee, then his ribs. He doubled over, gasping. The woman with the knife circled, blade flashing under fluorescent lights. "You move well," she said. "Too well for a janitor." Naomi's eyes locked on hers. "That's because I'm not one." She shifted her stance, weight balanced, shoulders squared. The woman hesitated for just a breath, reading the posture of someone trained. Then she lunged. Naomi deflected with the mop handle, the crack of wood meeting steel ringing out. She pivoted, elbow striking the woman's jaw, sending the blade skittering across the floor. Tony finally stepped forward, pulling a length of chain from his coat. He swung it lazily, testing weight, eyes fixed on Naomi. "You've got skills," he admitted, "but skills don't matter when you're outnumbered." Naomi didn't flinch. Numbers don't win fights. Discipline does. They circled. Naomi's breathing stayed steady. Memories of Kandahar flashing in muscle memory, desert ambushes, alleyway skirmishes, nights when survival depended on staying calm while chaos raged. Tony swung the chain. Naomi ducked, closing distance, jabbing the mop handle into his ribs. He grunted, staggered, then swung again, this time grazing her shoulder. Pain flared, sharp but controlled. She reset her stance. From the corner of her eye, Naomi saw Ethan at the far end of the garage. He had stepped from the desk, frozen in disbelief at the scene unfolding. His flashlight shook in his hand. "Call it in," Naomi barked. Her voice snapped him to attention. He scrambled for the radio, calling backup, his voice trembling but loud. "Security breach level B garage." Now the sound rattled Tony's crew. They hadn't expected witnesses. One man grabbed the injured woman, pulling her toward the SUV. Another limped after them. Tony lingered, glaring at Naomi with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed. Naomi lifted the mop handle, blood trickling from her shoulder, but her eyes cold and unwavering. "No, it's just beginning." Tony backed away slowly, retreating to the SUV. Tires screeched as the vehicles peeled out of the garage, leaving the stench of burned rubber behind. Naomi lowered her makeshift weapon, chest rising and falling with steady breaths. She turned toward Ethan, who was still gripping the radio like a lifeline. "You okay?" she asked. "I should be asking you that," Ethan exclaimed, eyes wide. "They came at you with chains and knives. And you, what the hell was that?" Naomi wiped her forehead with the back of her sleeve. Calm again. "Training." Ethan stared at her. "Training. You fight like military?" Naomi didn't answer. She walked to her car, opened the trunk, and pulled out a small first aid kit. As she bandaged her shoulder, Ethan hovered, words tumbling. "Why would Bradley hire people like that for you?" "You're just—" He stopped himself. "You're not just a janitor. Are you?" Naomi tightened the bandage, then met his eyes. "No, I'm not." Ethan swallowed hard. "Then who are you?" Naomi's silence was deliberate. She didn't owe him the truth yet, but she saw the trust building in his eyes, the shift from guilt to loyalty. By the time backup guards arrived, the garage was a mess of skid marks and broken glass. Naomi gave her statement in clipped words. 4 intruders, armed, escaped before apprehension. She left Ethan's role out of it, Protecting him was part of her calculus now. When she finally returned home, Naomi collapsed onto her couch, exhaustion hitting like a wave. She glanced at Marcus's dog tags, whispering, "First strike repelled. Next one won't be so easy." She opened her notebook and wrote in firm strokes, "Bradley escalates. Tony tested. My cover won't hold forever." Her eyes hardened. She had kept her strength hidden long enough. The battle lines were drawing clearer. The following Monday, Whitaker Plaza buzzed with an unusual energy. The garage incident had not made the news, but whispers carried fast within the building's walls. Someone claimed 4 intruders had broken in. Another said a janitor had fought them off. Details twisted with every retelling until no one knew what was fact or rumor. Naomi Turner moved through the lobby as she always did, mop in hand, uniform crisp, expression unreadable. But this time, eyes followed her. Conversations paused mid-sentence when she passed. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with quiet admiration. Grace Holloway approached cautiously at the coffee machine. Her voice was hushed. "They're saying you fought them. Is it true?" Naomi poured creamer into her cup, stirring slowly. "People say many things." Grace studied her, frowning. "You don't look like someone who scares easy." "Maybe that's what's unsettling people. Around here, we're used to being scared." Naomi didn't answer. She simply touched Grace's arm gently, a silent reassurance, then walked away. Meanwhile, in her office, Monica Liang sifted through incident reports. The official security write-up was vague. 4 unidentified individuals entered garage. No arrests. Minimal damage. But Monica wasn't satisfied. She had spoken to 2 guards who'd responded late. They described hearing a woman's voice shouting commands with the authority of someone trained. One insisted it was the janitor. Monica leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Who are you?" "Naomi Turner," she whispered to herself. Sam Ortega had his own suspicions. He'd been monitoring the network logs all weekend. The night of the garage incident, files had been wiped again more aggressively than before. He noticed something else, too. Bradley Whitaker's login appeared during the window when the cameras went dark. To Sam, the timing was no coincidence, but Sam wasn't reckless. He didn't run to HR. Instead, he closed his laptop, muttered, "Let's see how this plays out," and tucked the information away for later, on the top floor. Bradley paced his office, scotch in hand, even though it was barely past noon. Tony Marquez's failure gnawed at him. He had paid for silence, but instead he'd stirred chaos. Employees were whispering, and Bradley's control over the building felt shakier than ever. He slammed his glass onto the desk, muttering, "A janitor. A damn janitor, making me look weak." Charles Whitaker Sr. had drilled into him that power was about perception, and right now, perception was slipping. Bradley knew he had to crush it before it spread further. By midweek, Naomi sensed the shift. Employees she barely knew nodded at her in hallways. Some whispered thanks under their breath. Others avoided her, nervous to be associated with someone suddenly seen as dangerous. Ethan Cole, however, looked steadier than before. When he passed Naomi at the lobby desk, his voice was firm. "I kept the footage safe. No one touched it." Naomi gave him a small nod. "Good. Hold it tight. It may matter." That evening, Grace found Naomi in the break room again. Her voice trembled. "You don't understand. Bradley's family. When they feel threatened, people disappear. I saw it years ago. An accountant asked too many questions one day. He was gone. No explanation." Naomi's expression softened. "I understand more than you think." Grace searched her eyes. Then why stay? Naomi's answer was quiet but resolute. Because leaving means they win, and I don't believe in surrender. Grace exhaled, both relieved and afraid. Later that night, Naomi walked the garage alone once more, tracing the path where Tony's crew had attacked. She studied tire marks, noted new security cameras installed hastily over the weekend. Superficial fixes. She knew better. Bradley wasn't done. She leaned against a pillar, eyes closed, listening to the hum of the lights. The soldier in her was awake again, pacing inside her chest. She didn't want this fight, but it was here, and now. The building itself felt like a battlefield, one where allies hid behind desks and enemies wore suits. Across town, Tony Marquez nursed a bruised rib in his pride. His crew was restless. One demanded more money for the risk. Another threatened to walk. Tony silenced them with a glare. Nobody embarrasses me twice. We'll regroup. Next time, she won't walk away. Back at Whitaker Plaza, Monica Liang finally confronted Naomi. It happened late Thursday evening. Most employees had gone home, and Naomi was wiping down glass near the HR office. Monica stepped into the hallway, arms folded. We need to talk. Naomi kept cleaning. About why 4 armed intruders ended up in the same garage you just happened to be in. About why 2 guards swore you fought them like a soldier. About why every time Bradley Whitaker loses his temper, you're in the middle of it. Naomi turned slowly, meeting Monica's gaze. Her voice was calm. And what do you think the answer is? Monica hesitated. I think you're not who you say you are. And if that's true, I need to know whether you're here to help this place or burn it down. Silence stretched. Naomi finally spoke. I'm here to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's all you need to know. Monica studied her, then gave a short nod. Then be careful, because Bradley is starting to sense it too. And when men like him sense they're losing control, they lash out harder. When Monica walked away, Naomi leaned against her mop, exhaling slowly. Another thread had tightened. Another ally, though cautious, had joined the quiet circle. By Friday, Naomi's notebook was heavier with details, whispers, glances, erased logs, financial anomalies. The picture was forming. She sat in the diner that night, coffee cooling beside her, pen scratching across paper. She wrote one line in bold, "This isn't just survival. This is exposure." Naomi closed the notebook and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Bradley Whitaker was plotting. Tony Marquez was nursing his grudge, and her allies were waiting, perhaps unknowingly, for her next move. The war hadn't come to Whitaker Plaza by accident. It had been invited, and Naomi Turner, soldier and CEO hidden in plain sight, was ready to meet it head-on. Friday evening draped Whitaker Plaza in glittering light. Chandeliers gleamed above marble floors, and velvet ropes separated the powerful from the ordinary. Bradley Whitaker had spared no expense. The annual Whitaker Foundation Gala was more than a fundraiser. It was his stage to reassert dominance. Celebrities arrived in sleek cars. Politicians posed with flutes of champagne. Business leaders shook hands with carefully rehearsed smiles. For Bradley, every flash of the camera was a lifeline. Every headline tomorrow his insurance policy against whispers of weakness. He stood at the entrance in a tailored tuxedo, greeting each guest with a practiced charm. Welcome, Congressman. Delighted to have you. Make sure to bid on the silent auction. But beneath the veneer, his jaw was tight. He scanned the crowd constantly, searching for signs of defiance, for the shadow of one janitor who had disrupted his world. Downstairs. Naomi Turner tied her apron in the service corridor. She had volunteered for extra duty that night, knowing it gave her access to the gala floor, rolling a cart stacked with glasses. She pushed through the swinging doors and blended into the army of staff weaving between gowns and tuxedos. No one looked twice at a janitor serving drinks. That anonymity was her armor. From her vantage point, Naomi observed Bradley like a sniper studying a target. Every handshake, every smirk, it was a performance meant to erase the image of a man hiring thugs and losing control. Across the ballroom, Grace Holloway sat at an accounting firm's table, her dress borrowed, her nerves raw. She wasn't supposed to be there, but Naomi had pressed an invitation into her hand. "See how they operate," Naomi had said. "Knowledge is power." Grace's eyes widened at the opulence. She thought of the janitors who worked double shifts to afford rent, of the single mothers clocking out past midnight. The contrast made her stomach twist. Ethan Cole, in a crisp security uniform, stood by the stage. His orders had been simple: watch the entrances, keep undesirables out. But his real mission was different. Naomi had asked him to notice what others ignore. He noticed plenty. The whispered conversations near the coat check. The USB drive exchanged between two men in suits. The way Bradley's assistant kept slipping into the service hallway, phone pressed tightly to his ear. Monica Liang moved gracefully among donors, clipboard in hand. Officially, she was overseeing HR's silent auction volunteers. Unofficially, she was listening. Words floated past Whitaker over-leveraged. Investors restless. Family infighting. Each snippet was ammunition. Sam Ortega, unseen but not absent, sat in his apartment miles away, laptop glowing. He had tapped into the plaza's Wi-Fi, monitoring traffic. Tonight's gala generated a storm of emails, transfers, and encrypted calls. His fingers danced over the keyboard, tracing digital footprints that led, inevitably, back to Bradley's own accounts. At 8:00 p.m., Bradley mounted the stage. Applause rippled. Cameras clicked. He basked in the spotlight, his smile wide. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth, "tonight we celebrate the future. The Whitaker Foundation has always stood for strength, vision, and community. And with your generous support, we will continue to uplift those in need." The irony hung heavy. Naomi steadied a tray of champagne, forcing her face neutral as Bradley's words slithered through the ballroom. "Strength," he said, "means never wavering, never bowing to pressure. It means leading when others falter." Grace's hands clenched under the tablecloth. She could almost hear the unspoken words, "I will not be humiliated by a janitor." Applause filled the room again, but Naomi caught subtle shifts. A donor frowning at Bradley's arrogance. A councilwoman checking her phone, unimpressed. Then came the silent auction results. One item, a signed photograph of Charles Whitaker Sr., closed at a staggering bid far above its value. Bradley beamed, certain it was proof of his family's enduring influence. But Naomi knew better. She'd seen Ethan whisper to Monica earlier. That bid hadn't come from a loyal supporter. It came from an LLC Naomi's allies had set up, designed to expose inflated fundraising tactics. A seed of doubt planted in the books. Near the bar, Grace overheard two businessmen muttering, "He's covering something. Numbers don't add up. You heard about the breach last week. File's gone." She felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't brave like Naomi, but in that moment, she realized her fear could be turned outward against Bradley. At 9:30 Teop, Mem. Naomi slipped into the kitchen, Ethan joined her under the hum of industrial lights. He's holding together, but barely. Ethan whispered. Naomi nodded. Pressure him, not directly. Let him feel the walls closing in. Ethan hesitated. You're not afraid he'll strike back harder. Naomi's eyes were steady. Fear is his weapon. Exposure is ours. Back in the ballroom. Monica guided a senator toward a conversation with Grace. It looked casual, but every word was calculated. Grace spoke of missing pension funds, of unpaid overtime. The senator's brows knitted. Seeds became saplings. By the time dessert was served, Bradley's smile was cracking. Too many glances exchanged without his inclusion. Too many murmurs he couldn't decipher. He raised his glass for a toast, his voice louder, sharper, to power that never falters. The clink of glasses was hesitant. A journalist scribbled in her notebook. Naomi, clearing plates nearby, met Bradley's eyes just for a second. Her look was calm, almost pitying. For the first time, Bradley felt something colder than anger crawl up his spine, doubt. At 11 p.m., guests began to leave. Limos lined the curb. Bradley shook hands, but his grip was tighter now, his laughter brittle. In the service hall, Naomi wiped her hands and whispered to Monica, Tonight, he tried to prove he's untouchable. Tomorrow, he'll know he's not. Monica exhaled, the weight of risk pressing down. We've set the fire. Now we see if it burns. Outside. Grace clutched her shawl against the night air, heart pounding. She had spoken truths aloud. She'd kept buried for years. She wasn't sure if she was brave or reckless. Ethan escorted guests, but his eyes kept darting back to the tower of Whitaker Plaza, where lights still burned in Bradley's office, and across the city. Sam Ortega pressed save on an encrypted folder labeled Whitaker Waji Gala Leaks. For Bradley Whitaker, the gala had been a stage. For Naomi Turner and her allies, it was a battlefield, and the battle was shifting. The morning after the gala, Whitaker Plaza was quieter than usual. Gone were the glittering gowns and tuxedos, replaced by gray suits and tired faces. Yet the air carried a tension sharper than any hangover. Everyone had seen something in Bradley Whitaker's eyes last night, a flicker of desperation behind his forced smile. Bradley stormed into the building at 8:15, sunglasses masking bloodshot eyes. His assistant trailed behind, juggling files and a phone pressed to his ear. Without greeting anyone, Bradley barked orders. Conference room. Now. Inside. Executives gathered like school children awaiting punishment. Bradley ripped off his glasses and slammed them onto the table. Last night was a disaster. One executive cleared his throat. The donors pledged nearly $2 million. Don't insult me, Bradley snapped. I saw their faces. I heard the whispers. They think I'm weak. And weakness in this city is a death sentence. He paced the length of the room, hands shaking. From now on, I want full control. No leaks, no gossip, no stories about janitors fighting thugs in my garage. The room went still. Executives shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared speak. Bradley jabbed a finger at the head of security. Find out who's spreading rumors. Fire them. If you can't prove it, fire them anyway. Fear is better than doubt. Meanwhile, Naomi Turner mopped the marble floor just outside the conference room. She could hear fragments of Bradley's rage through the heavy door. Each word confirmed what she already knew: he was spiraling. Later that afternoon, Monica Liang received an email marked urgent. It was a list of employees slated for review, a euphemism everyone understood. The names were mostly lower-level staff, janitors, clerks, and guards, people without power, people Bradley believed were expendable. Monica clenched her jaw. This was retaliation dressed as efficiency. She closed the email and whispered, "Not on my watch." Ethan Cole felt the pressure too. Security shifts were doubled. Guards were ordered to log every staff movement, every visitor. Ethan knew the net was tightening. He also knew his choice to safeguard the garage footage made him a target. That evening, Naomi found him by the loading dock. His face was pale. "They asked me directly if I'd seen anything on the cameras. I lied. I said the system was offline, but if they dig deeper..." Naomi placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Hold the line. Fear thrives on silence. As long as you speak carefully, you're safe." Ethan swallowed hard. "Safe doesn't feel real here." Naomi's eyes softened. "I know, but sometimes courage is simply staying one more day." Across town, Bradley met Tony Marquez in a dim bar. Tony's jaw was bruised, his pride still raw. "You failed me," Bradley hissed. Tony smirked, lighting a cigarette. "Your intel failed you. That janitor isn't ordinary. She fights like military. Who the hell is she?" Bradley's hand tightened around his glass. "Find out. And this time, I want her broken. Not scared. Broken." Tony leaned forward. "That'll cost extra." "Send me the bill," Bradley snapped. "I don't care what it takes." Back at Whitaker Plaza, Grace Holloway received a call from an unknown number. A gravelly voice warned, "Stop asking questions about the pensions, or you'll regret it." Grace hung up, trembling. For years, she had buried her concerns, too afraid to speak. Now, fear had a voice, and it was closing in. She considered quitting, disappearing into obscurity. But Naomi's words echoed, "Leaving means they win." So Grace stayed, shaking, but resolute. Meanwhile, Sam Ortega uncovered more damning evidence. The night of the gala, Bradley's accounts had transferred funds to offshore shells. The files Bradley's assistant carried weren't donations, they were cover-ups. Sam encrypted the data, whispering, "One wrong move, Whitaker, and the world sees this." But Sam wasn't naive. He knew that exposing Bradley too soon would backfire. Timing was everything. By midweek, Naomi felt the walls pressing in. Guards monitored her movements more closely. Colleagues spoke in hushed tones. Even her mop bucket was searched twice. In the janitor's closet, she sat on an overturned crate, notebook balanced on her knee. She mapped alliances, risks, escape routes. Her soldier's mind refused to rest. She scribbled a line. The enemy tightens control before collapse. But doubt crept in too. How long could she balance her dual identity, humble janitor and hidden CEO? How long before Bradley struck again? That night, she walked home through quiet streets, the weight of her secret heavy. She passed a mural of fallen soldiers, names etched beneath painted faces. She touched one name. She knew an old comrade lost in Iraq. Her whisper was barely audible. "I'll carry it, so they don't have to." The next morning, Bradley unveiled a new initiative, Operation Order. Every employee had to sign non-disclosure agreements, stricter than ever. Any breach meant immediate termination. Surveillance cameras were installed in hallways, elevators, even break rooms. Employees signed with trembling hands. Naomi signed too, knowing the paper was meaningless against truth. In the cafeteria, whispers spread like wildfire. "He's scared. He's losing it. Someone's going to get hurt." Monica pulled Naomi aside. "It's worse than I thought. He's not just covering his tracks. He's preparing for war against his own staff." "We need to move faster." Naomi's voice was low. "Not yet." Fear makes him sloppy. When he overreaches, that's when we strike. By Friday, the facade of Whitaker Plaza was cracking. Donors called with questions. Journalists requested clarifications. Rumors about offshore accounts began leaking on social media. Bradley sat in his office, staring at the skyline, fists clenched. For the first time, he felt the city wasn't bending to him, it was tilting away. He muttered, "Who the hell is Naomi Turner downstairs?" Naomi wiped fingerprints off glass doors. Her reflection stared back strong, calm, unbroken. The battle lines were clear now. Bradley had money and power. Naomi had truth and resilience. The war inside Whitaker Plaza was no longer hidden. It was unfolding, brick by brick, whisper by whisper, until only one side would stand. By Monday morning, the rhythm of Whitaker Plaza had changed. Employees moved more cautiously. Conversations clipped, laughter rare. Bradley's new surveillance cameras blinked from every corner, red dots glowing like watchful eyes. To an outsider, it looked like discipline. To those inside, it felt like occupation. Naomi Turner noticed the shift immediately. She swept the lobby with deliberate slowness, cataloging faces. Fear lived in the hunched shoulders of clerks, in the darting glances of janitors, in the silence that fell whenever a guard entered the room. But beneath the fear, Naomi saw something else, readiness. People wanted change. They just needed permission to believe it was possible. That afternoon, she found Grace Holloway in the copy room, hands trembling as she shredded old invoices. Naomi closed the door behind them. "Grace," she said softly, "how many people do you trust here?" Grace startled. "What do you mean, I mean?" Naomi continued. "If the truth about Bradley came out, who would stand with us? Who wouldn't look away?" Grace hesitated, then whispered, "More than you think. But we've all been alone for so long, no one dares admit it." Naomi nodded. "Then let's stop being alone." That evening, Naomi arranged an informal meeting in the basement maintenance room. She chose allies carefully. Grace for her knowledge of finances, Ethan Cole for access to security, Monica Liang for influence over staff, and Sam Ortega, brought in via encrypted video call. The group gathered around a flickering fluorescent light. Ethan spoke first. Bradley's doubling down. "Guards are being told to report anyone talking about the gala. If they find the footage I kept..." His voice trailed off. Sam's voice crackled from the laptop speaker. "And his accounts are dirtier than we thought. Offshore transfers, falsified donor lists, even shell companies tied to construction contracts. If this gets out, he's finished. But we need timing and safety." Monica folded her arms. "Safety isn't guaranteed. He's already drafting termination lists. And if we misstep, we'll be on them." Naomi looked around the room, steady and calm. "Then we don't misstep. We move carefully, quietly. We don't call it rebellion. We call it survival," Grace whispered. "And if survival turns into something bigger," Naomi's voice was soft but firm, "then we're ready." For the first time, the maintenance room buzzed with something other than fear possibility. Over the next week, their resistance grew roots. Naomi played the role of messenger, passing slips of paper folded into napkins, carrying notes hidden in mop handles. Ethan rerouted security patrols, giving staff breathing space to talk without cameras watching. Monica began recording Bradley's tirades under the guise of meeting minutes. Grace compiled files of missing pension funds, each document copied and hidden. Sam expanded his digital net, tracing connections between Bradley and Tony Marquez's crew. Every move was small, invisible. Together, They formed a mosaic of defiance, but Bradley sensed it. Late Wednesday, he stormed through the accounting floor, slamming his fist on desks. "I hear whispers." He growled. "I smell betrayal. If anyone thinks they can undermine me, remember this: I built this empire, and I'll burn it down before I let it be taken." His eyes landed on Grace. She dropped her gaze, papers trembling in her hands. Bradley sneered. "That's right. Keep your head down." Naomi watched from the hallway, her jaw tight. The soldier in her wanted to step forward, to end it in that moment, but patience was the sharper weapon. That night, Naomi and Ethan met by the loading dock. He leaned against the wall, exhaling smoke. "He's unraveling," Ethan said. "The guards don't respect him. They're scared of losing jobs, not loyal. A couple even asked me what I thought about all this." Naomi tilted her head. "And what did you tell them? That sometimes the bravest thing is saying no?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Good. It will keep planting seeds. Fear divides. Hope unites." Meanwhile, Sam uncovered a chilling thread payments from Bradley's account to Tony Marquez had resumed. Larger this time. Enough to buy silence or violence. He messaged Naomi through encrypted chat. "He's bringing them back. Prepare." Naomi read the message in the janitor's closet, heart steady. She touched the edge of her notebook, where she had scribbled a reminder from her military days: anticipate, adapt, overcome. On Friday, the resistance met again in the basement. Grace brought files in a worn leather folder. Monica arrived with voice recordings. Ethan slipped in, reporting that several guards had quietly pledged support if things turned dangerous. Sam's voice joined through the speaker. "Sharper now. We've got enough evidence to bury him. The question is, when do we strike Naomi?" Looked at each face. "Not yet. Bradley's desperate. If we act now, he'll claim it's sabotage, paint us as traitors. We wait until he shows the world his own hand. Then we reveal ours." Monica frowned. "That means letting him tighten control. People will suffer." Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "They already suffer. A few more weeks won't break them, but it will break him." Silence hung heavy, but no one argued. They trusted her. As they dispersed, Grace lingered. "Naomi," she whispered, "sometimes I don't know how you stay so calm." "Aren't you afraid?" Naomi placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Of course. Fear is natural. But fear doesn't get to decide what I do next. That's my choice." When Grace left, Naomi sat alone in the maintenance room, listening to the hum of pipes. For a moment, her mask slipped. She thought of nights in the desert, comrades lost, promises made. She thought of the faces here: Grace, Ethan, Monica. Sam, ordinary people thrust into extraordinary struggle. And she knew her duty hadn't ended with her military service. It had only changed uniforms. Meanwhile, high above, Bradley stared out his office window at the city skyline. He poured another drink, muttering to his reflection, "You think you can defy me? You think you can win." He didn't see the cracks spreading beneath his feet. He didn't hear the quiet murmur of resistance threading through his empire. But Naomi did, and she knew that soon. Silence would become a roar. The storm broke on a Tuesday night. Rain hammered the glass walls of Whitaker Plaza. The city outside blurred into streaks of neon. Most employees had gone home early, but Naomi Turner remained. She often volunteered for closing shifts, part cover, part instinct. Soldiers never left the battlefield until it was secure. She was pushing her cart across the lobby when the power flickered. Just a second. No more. Enough to make the hair on her neck rise. Then her phone buzzed with a message from Sam Ortega, unusual network traffic. Cameras just went offline for 90 seconds. Not an accident. Be alert. Naomi parked the cart near the elevators and slipped into the stairwell. Her boots echoed softly on the concrete. She descended 2 flights before she heard it, the shuffle of heavy boots below. Too many to be janitors. Tony Marquez had returned. He and 3 men waited in the garage, their figures distorted by the fluorescent hum. One tapped a bat against his palm. Another adjusted the hood of his sweatshirt. Tony's smirk spread as he saw Naomi step into view. "Well, well," he drawled. "The janitor with fists of steel? Bradley wants to send a message. You should have stayed invisible." Naomi's voice was steady. "And you should have stayed gone." The men advanced. Naomi's mind calculated distances, angles, exits. She didn't want this fight. But her body remembered every drill, every mission. The first swung the bat. Naomi ducked, catching his wrist and twisting until the bat clattered across the concrete. A swift knee to his ribs sent him sprawling. The second lunged with a knife. Naomi sidestepped, grabbing his arm and slamming it against a pillar. The blade fell, clinking. She shoved him backward, breathless but unbroken. Tony clapped slowly, mockery dripping from every sound. "Impressive, but you can't fight us all forever." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "I don't need forever. Just long enough." The stairwell door burst open. Ethan Cole rushed in, baton drawn. His voice shook, but held firm. "Step away from her." The men hesitated, momentarily surprised. Naomi seized the moment, grabbing the fallen bat and sweeping it low across the third man's legs. He crashed to the ground with a groan. Tony snarled, "This isn't over." He grabbed the knife from the floor, pointing it at Naomi. "You'll regret crossing Bradley." Naomi raised the bat. Stance solid. "Tell him I don't scare easy." Sirens wailed in the distance, security reinforcements alerted by Ethan's call. Tony cursed, retreating into the shadows with his injured crew. Tires screeched as they sped out of the garage. Naomi exhaled, lowering the bat. Ethan's hands shook as he reholstered his baton. "They were going to kill you." Naomi met his eyes. "No. They were going to try." Word of the attack spread quietly the next morning. Official reports described it as an attempted burglary, but employees knew better. Whispers carried through cubicles Bradley had unleashed his dogs again. Grace Holloway cornered Naomi in the cafeteria. Her voice trembled. "He won't stop. Will he? He'll keep sending them until one of us doesn't come back." Naomi placed a hand over Grace's shaking fingers. "He escalates because he's afraid. That means we're closer than we think." But Monica Liang wasn't comforted. She slammed her office door after hearing the news. "This is madness," she hissed to Naomi. "I signed up to protect staff, not lead them into war." Naomi's tone was gentle but unyielding. "We didn't start this. But if we don't finish it, Bradley will destroy us piece by piece. I need you. Monica, they need you." Monica closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. "Damn you, Naomi, for making me care." Meanwhile, Sam Ortega traced the digital fingerprints left during the blackout. His stomach tightened as he saw the IP logs someone inside Whitaker Plaza had coordinated with Tony's crew, feeding them entry codes. A traitor existed within their ranks. He typed quickly, "Naomi, you've got a mole. Someone on the inside is helping Bradley." That evening, Naomi gathered the group in the basement maintenance room. Ethan recounted the attack, his hands still trembling. Grace brought copies of pension files. Monica pressed play on Bradley's latest recorded tirade, his voice dripping with venom. "If fear doesn't work, I'll use pain. Sam's voice filtered through the speaker, and someone here helped Tony. The blackout wasn't just external. It came from inside the building. The room went silent. Accusations hovered, but were unsaid. Naomi raised her hand. No pointing fingers without proof. That's what Bradley wants, division. We stay united. We watch. And when the mole slips, we act, Grace whispered. What if the mole costs someone's life? Naomi met her eyes. Then I'll take the risk. That's my choice, not yours. Her words silenced further protest. After the meeting, Naomi lingered alone. The soldier in her weighed tactics, casualties, outcomes. But the leader in her knew this wasn't just a mission. It was people's lives, their hope, their chance to stand up after years of silence. Outside, Bradley poured another drink in his penthouse. Tony's call had been brief. She's tough, more than tough, maybe military. Bradley's hand tightened around the glass. Then we break her another way. Everyone has a weakness. Find hers. His reflection in the window sneered back. A man consumed by the fear of losing control. But Naomi Turner wasn't playing his game anymore. She was writing her own. The garage attack had left scars no one could see. Naomi Turner noticed it in the way Ethan Cole's hands still trembled when he keyed into the security booth, in the way Grace Holloway flinched whenever Bradley Whitaker's voice echoed across the floor. Even Monica Liang's composure had cracks, her clipped sentences sharper than before. And then came Sam Ortega's warning there was a mole. The knowledge hung over them like a storm cloud. Every meeting felt heavier, every silence suspect. Naomi, trained to detect tension in squads under fire, saw it immediately. Fear didn't just come from Bradley, now it came from within. On Wednesday, Naomi found Grace in the stairwell, clutching a folder of pension documents. Her knuckles were white. "Grace," Naomi said softly, "you're carrying too much." Grace shook her head. "It's not the files. It's the looks. People know someone's feeding him information. What if they think it's me?" Naomi's voice was steady. "Then we prove it's not. Fear thrives on doubt. Truth cuts through it." But Naomi herself wasn't immune. Alone in the janitor's closet that night, she flipped through her notebook, drawing lines between names. Who had access to security codes? Who knew about their meetings? Her pen hovered over each ally's name, unwilling to mark any of them as suspect. Yet the soldier in her whispered, "Trust is earned. Trust can be broken." Meanwhile, Bradley convened a private meeting in his glass-walled office. His assistant handed him a list of suspected agitators. Bradley's smirk widened as he scanned it. "Perfect. Let's tighten the noose." He leaned back in his chair. "Swirling scotch. Fire 2 tomorrow. Make it loud. Make the rest sweat." That next morning, 2 employees were escorted out by guards. Their desks were cleared within minutes. The message was clear, no one was safe. Whispers filled the cafeteria. She asked questions about the funds. He was seen talking to the janitor. Fear deepened, but so did resentment. Bradley thought he was instilling obedience. In reality, he was building quiet fury. Monica Liang stormed into the maintenance room that evening. "This is unsustainable," she hissed. "He's picking people off like pawns. We can't just sit and watch." Ethan leaned against the wall, his voice low. "We can't fight him head-on either. He's got money, lawyers, and half the city in his pocket." Sam's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "But not forever. I've traced more shell companies. He's bleeding money faster than he admits. One push at the right moment, and the facade crumbles." Grace's eyes flicked nervously around the room. But who told him about our meetings? Someone knew. The silence that followed was suffocating. Naomi broke it with a calm, measured tone. We don't point fingers without proof. That's his weapon, not ours. Until we know, we stand together. But even as she spoke, Naomi felt the fissures widening. Later that night, Ethan walked Naomi to the curb. Rain pattered against the pavement. "Do you really think we can hold this together?" he asked. Naomi studied the wet streets, the glowing red of the traffic lights. A squad under pressure either fractures or fuses. My job is to make sure we fuse. Ethan nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Across town, Bradley pored over files in his penthouse. Tony Marquez leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "She's tougher than we thought," Tony muttered. Bradley sneered. "Then we hit where she's weak. Everyone has one. Family, friends, allies. Find it." Tony smirked. "And if her weakness is she doesn't know who to trust," Bradley's grin widened. "Then we feed that fire until she burns herself." Back at the plaza, the plan was already in motion. Anonymous notes appeared in lockers. "One of you is lying." Emails circulated with doctored screenshots, hinting at betrayal, small seeds, carefully sown, designed to make Naomi's group unravel. Grace found one such note tucked into her folder, her face drained of color. She showed it to Naomi, voice trembling. "They're trying to turn us against each other?" Naomi's jaw tightened. "Which means they're afraid of us." But even she couldn't ignore the way Monica avoided her gaze during the next meeting, or the way Ethan's questions grew sharper, probing. Sam's digital voice carried suspicion now. Each word weighted. The fracture lines were forming. In the quiet of her apartment, Naomi sat by the window, rain streaking the glass. She thought of her years in uniform, how soldiers under pressure sometimes broke not from enemy fire, but from mistrust within. She had seen squads collapse from suspicion, comrades turn on each other. She whispered to the night, "Not this time. Not them." The next day, Bradley staged another performance. He paraded through the lobby with reporters trailing, declaring Whitaker Plaza a model of discipline and order. His voice boomed, confident. But Naomi saw the tightness in his jaw, the sweat at his collar. Later, in the maintenance room, Monica slammed her clipboard down. "If we don't act soon, he'll destroy us piece by piece. We need to expose him now." Sam's voice was sharp through the speaker. "Expose him without proof, and he spins it as sabotage." "We need patience," Grace whispered. "Patience could get us killed." Naomi raised a hand, her calm cutting through the noise. "Listen to me. He wants us fractured. He wants fear to turn us against each other. That's the real battle. If we hold the line, if we refuse to break, then we've already won half the war." The others fell silent. For a moment, trust held, fragile but intact. Still, Naomi knew Bradley's game had shifted. The mole wasn't just leaking information, they were actively sowing poison. And unless she uncovered them soon, her squad of ordinary heroes would shatter before the real fight even began. Naomi Turner woke before dawn, her body clock still tuned to the discipline of her army years. She brewed a pot of strong coffee, sat at her small kitchen table, and stared at the list Sam Ortega had sent her overnight. Shell companies, dummy accounts, false invoices. It was a spiderweb of deceit, and at the center sat Bradley Whitaker. But data on a screen meant nothing unless it was made undeniable. Bradley had spent his life twisting narratives, burying evidence under charm and cash. Naomi knew the only way to pierce his armor was daylight, public, undeniable daylight. By 8 a.m., Naomi was back at Whitaker Plaza. The lobby was humming with employees, their chatter subdued under the weight of recent firings. She carried her janitor's cart, the same old mop and bucket, but her mind was on the operation ahead. She'd asked Ethan Cole to meet her near the freight elevator. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but his resolve was there. "What's the play?" he asked quietly. Naomi slid a USB drive into his hand. Sam compiled video clips from the surveillance feeds Bradley's outbursts, his late-night meetings with Tony Marquez, even the footage from the night in the garage. "You'll connect this to the projector in Conference Room A during his big quarterly speech." Ethan swallowed. "That's suicide. If he finds out it's me—" Naomi cut him off with a steady look. "It won't be you. It'll be us. And by the time he realizes, the truth will already be out." Ethan nodded, though his fingers clenched the drive tight, as if it were a live grenade. The morning passed in a blur. Naomi cleaned offices, emptied bins, all the while feeling the undercurrent of anxiety. She noticed Monica Liang pacing near the HR desk, whispering urgently into her phone. Grace Holloway moved through the corridors like a ghost, shoulders hunched. Trust was fragile, but for today, they had to hold the line. At noon, Bradley strode into the building, entourage in tow. Cameras followed him. He had invited local media to showcase Whitaker Plaza's success. He relished the spotlight, shaking hands, flashing that polished smile. His arrogance was the very cover Naomi planned to use against him. By 1 p.m., the auditorium was packed. Employees filled the seats. Journalists lined the back. Cameras mounted on tripods. Bradley took the stage in his tailored navy suit, Scotch-smooth confidence dripping from every word. "Whitaker Plaza," he declared, "is not just a building. It's a beacon of discipline, order, and prosperity." Applause filled the room, though Naomi could hear the hollowness in it. She stood at the back, mop in hand, blending into the staff, eyes on Ethan near the projector booth. Sam's voice buzzed faintly in her earpiece. "Ready when you are." Bradley launched into his speech, touting profits and growth. Naomi gave the signal. Ethan slid the USB into the console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen behind Bradley flickered. At first, it looked like a technical glitch. Bradley laughed it off, raising his hands. Even our tech gets stage fright. But then the footage played. Grainy black and white, time-stamped Bradley in the garage, grabbing Naomi by the throat. Gas rippled through the audience. The clip cut to Bradley handing an envelope to Tony Marquez, whispering, "Handle it." Bradley froze. His confident mask cracked. This is doctored," he barked, but the footage rolled on. More clips appeared, Bradley screaming at staff, shredding documents, signing off false invoices. Each scene was damning, each one stripping away the facade. The room erupted in murmurs. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Employees whispered, some clutching their mouths in shock. Naomi stepped forward, her mop clattering to the floor. Her voice carried, calm but firm. "These are not fabrications. These are the truths you've tried to bury, and we will not be silent any more." All eyes turned. To most of the staff, she was just the janitor. Now she stood tall, her presence commanding. Bradley's face twisted with rage. "You think anyone will believe a janitor over me? Over everything I've built, Naomi didn't flinch. They don't have to believe me. They can see it for themselves." Monica Liang rose from her seat, her voice steady. "I've filed formal complaints that were buried. This is the proof. I stand with her. Grace Holloway stood too, clutching a folder. So do I. The numbers don't lie. The momentum shifted. Dozens of employees began to clap, not polite applause, but deliberate, defiant. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zooming in on Bradley's pale face. Bradley's composure shattered. He stormed off stage, barking orders to his guards. But the damage was done. The footage was already copied, emailed, uploaded. The internet would see it within minutes. In the chaos. Naomi caught Ethan's eye. Relief flickered there, but also fear. Because even as the room turned against Bradley, Naomi knew the fight wasn't over. That evening, Naomi returned to her apartment, exhaustion weighing heavy. Yet her mind replayed the day, not the victory, but the undercurrent. Someone had still fed Bradley information before. Someone in their circle was the mole. As she poured a glass of water, her phone buzzed with a new message. You don't know who to trust. No sender. Just the words. Naomi's grip tightened on the glass until it nearly cracked. The public strike had worked, but the war was far from over, and somewhere, close to her, the betrayer was smiling in the dark. The morning after the public strike, Naomi Turner walked into Whitaker Plaza expecting chaos. What she found was silence, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that comes before a storm. The footage had gone viral overnight. Local news loops replayed the moment Bradley Whitaker's hand gripped Naomi's throat in the garage. Hashtags were trending. Former employees chimed in with stories of abuse, fraud, intimidation. For a brief moment, Naomi felt hope. But then came the counterattack. At 9 a.m., Bradley's face filled every TV in the lobby. He stood behind a polished oak podium, American flag draped behind him, his voice steady, measured. These videos, he said, are the work of a malicious group seeking to dismantle Whitaker Plaza's reputation. They've doctored footage, spread lies, and infiltrated our workplace. And tragically, they've manipulated vulnerable employees to do their bidding. He paused, eyes glistening. Just so an old family trick, Naomi realized. Manufactured sincerity. I've given my life to this city. My family has built opportunities for thousands. I will not let criminals destroy what generations have created. The speech was slick, rehearsed. By the end, hashtags had shifted. Some doubted the footage, calling it AI deepfakes. Others accused Naomi and her allies of being pawns for rival corporations. Ethan Cole slammed his fist against the security desk. He's flipping it. People are buying it. Monica Liang's jaw tightened. That's the Whitaker playbook: deny, distract, discredit. He's been doing it for decades. Sam Ortega chimed in through the comm line. He's seeded bots online. I can trace the surge of posts. It's coordinated. Grace Holloway, pale and exhausted, whispered, and what if people believe him? What if they turn on us? Naomi stood steady, though her stomach knotted. Truth doesn't die, just because a liar shouts louder. We stay the course. We gather more proof. We protect each other. But privately, Naomi knew Bradley's tactic was working. She received a dozen anonymous threats by noon. Some employees who had clapped for her the day before now avoided her eyes. Fear was creeping back in. By evening, the group met in the maintenance room. The air was thick. No one touching the coffee Ethan had brought. We need to hit harder, Monica said. Release the financial records. Show the fraud. Sam hesitated. That's risky. Those files implicate not just Bradley, but half his board. If we leak them without airtight context, they'll spin it as theft. And someone here is still feeding him our moves. The words dropped like a bomb. Everyone stiffened. Grace looked down at her hands. Ethan glanced at Monica. Monica shot back a glare. The suspicion that had been festering now spilled into the open. Naomi raised her voice just enough to cut through. "Stop. We don't tear each other apart. That's exactly what he wants." But her own mind was spinning. She remembered the anonymous text, "You don't know who to trust," and the way Monica had been on her phone before the strike.
The way Grace had trembled with that note. The way Ethan's doubts grew sharper. Even Sam, hidden behind his digital presence, could be anyone. She forced herself to breathe. Paranoia kills faster than bullets. The meeting ended in uneasy silence. As Naomi left the plaza, rain misted the air. Her instincts buzzed someone was watching. She turned, scanning the shadows, but saw only the glint of headlights pulling away, across the city, in a penthouse suite.
Bradley Whitaker raised a glass of wine. Tony Marquez stood nearby, smirking. "You should have seen their faces," Bradley said, replaying the clip of his speech on a tablet. "Doubt is a beautiful poison. Once it's in, it spreads." Tony chuckled, and the mole Bradley tapped his glass against the table. "Still feeding, still close. We'll keep them on the hook until the final strike." Back in her apartment, Naomi tried to sleep, but her dreams were jagged flashes. Bradley's smirk, the crowd's gasps, Ethan's clenched fists, Grace's shaking hands. She woke before dawn, sweat on her brow. She poured coffee, staring at the steam. She remembered a lesson from combat. When the enemy fights dirty, clarity becomes your weapon. Don't react to noise. Focus on what can't be faked. By mid-morning, she was back at the plaza, eyes sharp. She walked the halls not as a janitor, but as a soldier scouting terrain. She noted who avoided her, who whispered as she passed. She logged details, the smudges of fresh ink on a report Grace carried, the faint tremor in Monica's voice, the split-second delay in Ethan's nod. Each clue was small, meaningless alone, but together they painted a picture. Someone in her circle wasn't just scared. They were playing both sides. At noon, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Tomorrow. Parking lot. Final move." Naomi stared at it, heart pounding. The place where it all began. The place Bradley had first tried to break her. She slipped the phone into her pocket, a calm resolve settling in. The storm was circling back to the parking lot. This time, she would be ready. The text message haunted Naomi Turner all night tomorrow. Parking lot. Final move. She sat by her window, city lights flickering like restless stars, and weighed her options. Walking into a trap was suicide, but ignoring it meant giving Bradley Whitaker the upper hand. Soldiers don't wait for ambushes, they anticipate, prepare, and control the field. By dawn, Naomi had a plan. At 6 a.m., she met Ethan Cole in the maintenance room. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice raw. "Naomi, this feels wrong. He wants you down there, alone. You can't." "I won't be alone," Naomi interrupted, her tone firm but steady. "I'll have eyes everywhere." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were blueprints of Whitaker Plaza's underground parking lot. Entrances, exits, blind spots, every angle mapped. She'd spent the night studying them. "Sam will monitor the cameras remotely," Naomi continued. "Monica will keep the guards occupied upstairs. Grace will—" She hesitated, watching Grace, who sat pale and silent. "Grace will run the numbers on Bradley's shell companies and be ready to drop them if things go south." Grace gave a weak nod, but Naomi noticed her hands trembling against the folder. Ethan leaned forward. "And me. You'll be on ground level, hidden. If things turn ugly, You're my extraction." Ethan swallowed, then nodded. "Got it." For the rest of the morning, Naomi moved through the building with quiet purpose. She stashed a small earpiece in her pocket, a tool she hadn't used since her army days. She checked the blind corners of the garage during her cleaning rounds, memorizing the smell of oil and the echo of footsteps against concrete. She could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down. Bradley had chosen the battleground, but she would shape the fight. At noon, Bradley gathered his board in the penthouse suite. Tony Marquez leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, while Bradley paced like a general before war. "Tonight," Bradley said, voice sharp, "we end this charade. She thinks she's clever, parading her little clips, whispering with my employees. But a janitor remains a janitor. I'll make sure she never shows her face in this city again." One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "Bradley, after yesterday, the press is already circling. Shouldn't we, Bradley, cut him off with a glare? Shouldn't we?" "What grovel? Apologize, I don't apologize. I destroy. That's how Whitakers survive." Tony smirked. "Then let's make sure she shows up." The mole already confirmed she got the message. Bradley's grin spread. "Good. Let her come. Let her think she's ready. We'll remind her who holds the power here." Back in the plaza cafeteria, Naomi spotted Monica Liang pacing with her phone again, whispering urgently. Monica noticed Naomi watching and snapped the phone shut. "Just my sister," she muttered. Naomi didn't respond. Her instincts prickled. Trust had always been fragile, but now, with the final move looming, every flicker of secrecy felt like betrayal. That evening, the team gathered one last time before the showdown. The room was tense, the hum of fluorescent lights loud in the silence. Naomi laid out the plan with military precision. "We enter at staggered times. No bunching, no obvious signals. Cameras will feed to Sam. If comms go dark, Ethan pulls me out, no matter what." "Understood." Ethan nodded, jaw tight. Monica scribbled notes, though her pen shook. Grace stared at the table, lips pressed thin. Naomi looked at each of them in turn. "We walk into this together. No one fractures. Not tonight." When the meeting ended, Naomi lingered behind. Grace was the last to leave, clutching her folder like a lifeline. Naomi caught her arm gently. "Grace," she said softly, "I know this is heavy, but you're stronger than you think." Grace's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She nodded quickly and slipped out, leaving Naomi alone with her thoughts. At 10 p.m., the garage was a hollow echo chamber of concrete and shadows. Naomi arrived first, mop bucket in tow, her cover intact. She tucked the earpiece into her ear. Visual confirmed. Sam's voice crackled. 2 vehicles parked near the west exit. Tony Marquez is in one of them." Naomi scanned the rows. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of gasoline lingered. Every sense sharpened. Ethan's voice whispered through comms. "I've got your 6 from the stairwell. No movement yet." Minutes dragged. Naomi's heartbeat was steady, trained. She adjusted her stance. Weight balanced, every muscle ready. Then headlights flared. A sleek black SUV rolled into the garage. Bradley stepped out, tailored suit pristine, smirk sharp as a blade. Tony followed, cracking his knuckles. "Well," Bradley drawled, voice echoing, "the janitor shows up. Brave. Or stupid." Naomi didn't move. "You asked for this. I'm here." Bradley spread his arms. "Mock innocent. And here I thought we could have ended this quietly. But you just don't know your place." Naomi's eyes narrowed. My place isn't under your boot. The tension thickened. Then Naomi noticed it, a flicker of movement in the shadows near the stairwell. Not Ethan. Too tall. Too stiff. Sam's voice came sharp in her ear. Naomi movement on the north side. Unauthorized. Ethan cursed over comms. That's not me. Someone else is down here. Naomi's stomach dropped. The mole. Bradley's grin widened, as if he'd read her thoughts. Oh, you brought friends? I did too. From the darkness. Another figure stepped forward, holding a phone that glowed faintly. Naomi's chest tightened. She recognized the silhouette. Grace Holloway. Her voice trembled, but her words cut. I'm sorry. Naomi, I never wanted this. But he promised my brother's debts would disappear. Ethan swore into comms. Monica's gasp echoed faintly. Sam muttered a curse. Naomi's heart sank, but her face remained calm. Soldier steady. Grace, she said softly, you had a choice, and you still do. Grace's eyes shimmered with guilt, but Bradley's laugh drowned it out. Touching, but too late. Tonight ends with you broken. Naomi. Permanently. The trap was sprung, but Naomi wasn't a soldier who walked blind. She shifted her stance. Every nerve sharpened. The parking lot was about to become a battlefield. The parking garage held its breath. The sound of dripping water echoed in the cavernous space, each drop punctuating the silence between Naomi Turner and Bradley Whitaker. Tony Marquez loomed beside his boss, a predator waiting for the signal to strike. And then there was Grace Holloway, her small frame trembling, torn between guilt and survival. Naomi stood her ground, every muscle calm, every sense sharpened. Years in combat had taught her that fear could be mastered, turned into fuel. Bradley smirked, voice bouncing off concrete. You see, Naomi, loyalty has a price. Grace understood that. Everyone does eventually. You think these people follow you because they believe in you? No, they're scared, and scared people sell out. Naomi's eyes stayed locked on Grace. Her voice softened, cutting through the tension. Grace, I know what debt does. I know what desperation feels like. But you're not defined by what he holds over you. You're defined by the choice you make right now. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She lowered the phone in her hand, fingers trembling. I didn't want to. I swear. I didn't want to. Tony barked a laugh. Too late for confessions, sweetheart. But Naomi's focus never wavered. She took one step forward, voice steady as steel. Bradley, you've spent your life thinking fear keeps people loyal. You never understood that respect, dignity, truth, those are stronger than any threat. Bradley's smile cracked. Big words from a janitor. Naomi's posture shifted, subtle but deliberate, the stance of a soldier ready to strike. I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I've stared down men scarier than you on battlefields halfway around the world, and I'm still standing. You're a spoiled child playing at power. For the first time. Bradley's eyes flickered with doubt. Then headlights flared. Another car entered the garage, Monica Liang at the wheel. Ethan Cole beside her. They stepped out, the sound of their shoes echoing like drum beats. You're not alone. Naomi, Monica said firmly. Ethan's voice carried across the space. And neither are the people you've hurt. Bradley, they're done being silent. Bradley snarled. You think a couple of nobodies will topple me? I own half this city. Sam Ortega's voice came sharp through Naomi's earpiece. Correction, you did. I just uploaded the files. Offshore accounts. Fraud. Everything. Media outlets are eating it alive as we speak. Naomi's lips curved in the faintest smile. Checkmate. Bradley lunged forward, fury breaking his polished mask. Enough, he roared, swinging at Naomi. But she sidestepped with practiced ease. His fist slammed into concrete, pain flashing across his face. Tony charged, but Ethan intercepted, grappling with him near the SUV. Years of training as a guard showed Ethan wasn't just loyal. He was strong. The fight was brutal, fists and grunts echoing through the garage. Naomi focused on Bradley. He came at her again, wild with rage. She deflected his blow, twisted his arm, and drove him to his knees in one fluid motion. The thud echoed like justice itself. Breathing hard, Bradley spat. "You think this changes anything? Money buys silence. Money buries truth." Naomi leaned close, voice low but sharp as a blade. "Not tonight. Tonight. Dignity speaks louder." Grace stumbled forward, tears streaking her face. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. No more hiding." Naomi met her eyes. "Then start by forgiving yourself, and stand with us." Grace nodded, shaky but resolute. By the time sirens wailed in the distance, Bradley was pinned against the concrete, Tony restrained by Ethan's grip. Red and blue lights flooded the garage. Police officers poured in, cameras flashing behind them. Reporters had followed the tip Sam leaked. The image was unforgettable. Bradley Whitaker, once untouchable, dragged away in handcuffs. Naomi stood tall, mop bucket at her side like a badge of honor. To the world, she had been invisible, a janitor in the shadows. Tonight, the shadows had spoken. Reporters shouted questions. "Who are you? How did you bring him down?" Naomi's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm someone who believes every person deserves dignity. And when dignity is stolen, we fight to get it back." The words spread like wildfire, repeated in headlines, shared on screens. Employees of Whitaker Plaza, inspired, stepped into the light with their own stories. In the days that followed, Bradley's empire collapsed. The fraud files dismantled his financial networks. Board members scrambled to distance themselves. Tony Marquez faced charges for conspiracy and assault. Grace Holloway, once the mole, stood in court. Her testimony a turning point that sealed Bradley's fate. As for Naomi, she didn't disappear back into anonymity. She stepped forward not as a janitor, but as Naomi Turner, veteran, leader, and rightful CEO of the very company Bradley thought he owned. At her first press conference, she wore no suit, no polished disguise, just a plain blazer, her army pin on the lapel. She spoke not of revenge, but of reform. "This isn't just about one man's corruption," she said. "It's about every place where silence let injustice thrive. That silence ends here." Monica Liang joined her at the podium, outlining sweeping changes in workplace accountability. Ethan Cole was promoted to head of security, tasked with ensuring no voice was ignored again. Grace Holloway began leading financial transparency projects, her redemption rooted in truth. And Sam Ortega, though preferring the shadows, was credited as the digital whistleblower who made the world see. Months later, the parking garage still smelled of gasoline and rain, but it no longer carried fear. Naomi sometimes walked through it after hours, mop handle in hand, remembering. She thought of the night Bradley's grip had closed around her throat, and how far they had come since then. One evening, Ethan found her there. "Why come back here?" he asked. Naomi smiled faintly. "Because this is where he tried to take my dignity, and this is where I took it back. Places like this don't have to stay haunted. They can become reminders." Ethan nodded. of what Naomi's gaze lingered on the dim light above, that even in the darkest corners, the truth can find its voice. And with that, she turned, walking back toward the light. The story of Naomi Turner reminds us that dignity is not a privilege, it is a birthright. No amount of money, status, or power gives someone the right to strip another person of their humanity. Many of us, especially as we grow older, have faced moments when society tried to make us feel invisible, small, or powerless. Naomi's journey is a reminder that true strength comes not from domination, but from the quiet resilience to say, "I will not be diminished." It also teaches us that betrayal and fear can exist even in close circles, but unity, truth, and integrity always shine brighter. Grace's decision to turn from being a mole to becoming a witness shows that redemption is possible, and Bradley's downfall is proof that arrogance eventually crumbles under the weight of truth. For each of us, the lesson is clear: never underestimate your own worth, never accept silence in the face of injustice, and never doubt that one voice steady and honest can inspire change. Dignity is the legacy we leave, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world. It helps us keep telling stories that inspire dignity, courage, and justice.